Praise be Jesus and Mary. Brothers and sisters, today we celebrate in the Franciscan order, in particular in the Franciscans of the Immaculate as a feast day, Blessed John Duns Scotus, who is arguably one of the greatest minds ever to have lived, possessed one of the greatest minds ever to have lived, and I believe in all likelihood will someday in the perhaps not so distant future be declared a doctor of the Church and take a place next to St. Thomas of Aquinas and St. Bonaventure and St. Anthony and the other great doctors of the Church. In fact, Blessed John Duns Scotus was born in 1266, which makes him a quasi-contemporary of St. Thomas of Aquinas and St. Bonaventure, both of whom died in 1274. So Blessed John would have been about 10 years old when they went to their heavenly reward. And he, like them, dedicated himself in his studies to the study of philosophy and theology. He belonged to that age, the scholastic age, in which we could say Western thought, and in particular Christian thought, reached arguably its zenith and has yet to ever surpass the accomplishments of that age. The effort at that time was to synthesize all knowledge. In other words, to try to unite all the sciences into one coherent understanding, somewhat like what the scientists today are striving to do in pursuing this so-called theory of everything. But the efforts of the scholastics was superior because they recognized and included the supreme knowledge, that is, divine revelation, into this harmonious system of thought. Blessed John Duns Scotus received an honorary title or a popular title. He's known as the Doctor Subtilis for his capacity to penetrate into the problems of human thought with some of the most subtle observations. And because he had an advantage simply by virtue of being born after St. Thomas and St. Bonaventure, he had the advantage to be able to study and benefit from all of their works, and then with the gift of intelligence that he was given, was able in some ways to perfect, to unravel some of the difficulties that St. Thomas and St. Bonaventure perhaps left somewhat less than perfectly resolved. And in fact, Blessed John Duns Scotus is of particular importance to our order because he is the one who first was able to express in a logical and perfectly coherent way the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, which those before him none could affirm, because there appeared to be a contradiction in the idea of the Immaculate Conception with another dogma of the faith, which was the universal inheritance of original sin. There's a nice summary in one of these books here that I referred to. What his thinking was. In 1306, Father John returned to Paris and there came to be known as the Doctor of Mary, after he had championed her Immaculate Conception and refuted all the objections of the learned men of the time against this prerogative of Our Lady. The perfect mediator, Father John pointed out, must in some one case have done the work of mediation most perfectly, which would not be unless there is some one person at least in whose regard the wrath of God was anticipated and not merely appeased. In other words, Christ, to be the perfect mediator, would have to spare or would have to redeem one person at least so perfectly that they would not have contracted the slightest sin. And in fact, that is the answer as to how Our Lady was born without sin, because God, being absolutely powerful, applied the benefits of redemption to Mary in anticipation of her conception, so that she was conceived free from the sin thanks to the mediation which Christ worked after. In 1854, Pope Pius IX solemnly declared the doctrine of Father John, which had always been accepted by the ordinary faithful, to be an article of faith. At the first moment of her conception, Mary was preserved free from the stain of original sin in view of the merits of Christ. There's also other doctrines to which Blessed John Duns Scotus contributed. The seal of the Church's approval was also placed on Father John's Christo-centric doctrine, which is also referred to as the Primacy of Christ. And the Franciscans of the Immaculate have published a nice summary of this doctrine written by Father Maximilian Mary Dean, the Primacy of Christ. And here it's summarized in this way. This approval was placed on Duns Scotus's Christocentric doctrine when the feast of Christ the King was instituted in 1925. Duns Scotus, writes Father Gemelli, conceived the universe in the form of a gigantic pyramid built up of every kind of genera and species, rising upward by degrees, the lower stages united in their most noble part to the higher. Jesus Christ is the culminating logical point of creation. Thus, the second person of the Blessed Trinity would have assumed a human nature even if Adam had not sinned. Because Adam sinned, Christ came as Redeemer of the human race, but he is at the same time the King of creation. And Father Maximilian, in his book, also observes that all Mariology, the study of the Blessed Virgin Mary, really derives from Duns Scotus's, or from the theory, or from the doctrine that Duns Scotus explains so well, the primacy of Christ. In other words, that all the universe exists in view of Christ, and we know that also from Scripture, and that Mary also is part of that unique decree when God the Father conceived in his mind of Christ, or the Word that would be made flesh. He obviously also conceived in his mind of the Immaculate, who would be the mother of the incarnate Word, perfect, full of grace, without sin. One other thing I'd like to just observe, because there's a word in the English language associated with the name of Duns Scotus. When you want to insult someone, at least in the olden days, even when I was a youngster, which I'm older than quite a few here, or some, we would use the word dunce to put someone down, to describe someone who is deficient mentally. And this insult came about because of the hatred for the doctrine, the Catholic doctrine of Duns Scotus. It derived during the time of the Reformation, and I'll read from Father Maximilian's book once more. Scotus is not well known in lands where the Reformation triumphed, especially in a Calvinistic form, because there every effort was made to eradicate his memory, or to remember him only as a fool, whence the origin of the English words dunce and duncecap, to denote one who stupidly adheres to the doctrines most associated with the name of Scotus as theologian, the absolute primacy of Christ and the mystery of the Eucharist, the Immaculate Conception, and the primacy of jurisdiction of St. Peter and his successors in the Church. These are the points of Catholic doctrine rejected above all in the English version of the Reformation. And Scotus's memory has suffered until now. In fact, his doctrine of the Immaculate Conception was debated for almost 600 years before the Holy Father declared it dogma. And he was not recognized officially as a blessed until 1993, although he was revered as a blessed within the Franciscan order and in various parts of Europe before then. But finally, in 1993, he was declared blessed, and we await the Church's judgment on whether or not he will be recognized as a saint. But clearly his doctrines have done great to contribute to the Church's understanding of Mary and her Immaculate Conception. And we thank God for Our Lady, through whom we receive Jesus Christ, the greatest of all goods, and for Blessed Duns Scotus, who was given this grace to explain the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. Blessed be Jesus and Mary.